You know the stories people tell around a campfire? They're supposed to be just that. Stories. But for this group of friends, the tales they were about to spin in the firelight weren't just for a good scare. They were a warning. The air in the clearing was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth, that perfect deep woods in late summer scent. A crackling campfire was doing its best to push back the darkness, its orange light painting shadows across the faces of 4 friends. This was their yearly ritual. One last getaway before summer gave up and turned into fall. A trip far away from cell service and the noise of the city. Ben, the group's self-appointed leader, had found the spot. He always did. It was a secluded clearing miles down an old logging road, tucked right up against a small, strangely still lake. He leaned back on a log, a proud grin on his face as he looked over their little kingdom for the night. Beside him, Chloe was nervously pulling at the sleeve of her hoodie. She was the worrier, her mind always ready to fill the shadows with things that weren't there. Across from them sat Liam, the pragmatist, the skeptic. He was poking the fire with a long stick, a small, cynical smirk on his face, already prepared to shoot down any story that didn't make logical sense. And then there was Maya. She was the heart of the group, the storyteller. She believed in the magic of a good story, the way it could make the night colder and the fire feel just a little bit warmer. "All right," Ben announced, his voice sounding huge in the quiet. "We're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knows we're here. It's perfect. Who's up first?" His eyes landed right on Maya, just like they always did. She smiled, the firelight dancing in her pupils. "I think I have one," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Something for a night exactly like this. It's a simple one. They call it the shadow in the trees." Liam let out a quiet scoff and shook his head. "Here we go." Chloe hugged her knees a little tighter. "Is it really scary?" Maya's smile got wider, but it never quite reached her eyes. "Only if you listen closely," Maya began, her voice weaving a story into the silent night. "The legend says that in these ancient forests, there's a creature that no one has ever truly seen. It doesn't have a name, or a shape you could describe, because it's a mimic. They say it starts small. You'll be deep in the woods just like we are now, and you'll hear a familiar sound, a bird call, and a squirrel rustling in the leaves." She stopped, letting the real sounds of the forest sink in. "But then you hear it again, and again. The exact same sound with the exact same rhythm at the exact same time apart. It's too perfect. It's not natural. That's when you know it's heard you. That's when you know it's watching." From there, the story goes, it moves on to voices. It'll learn the sound of a friend's laugh, or the specific way someone clears their throat. It will mimic a twig snapping just to see if you'll look. It's a predator that doesn't hunt with claws or teeth. It hunts with sound. It drives its prey mad with paranoia until they panic, run from the safety of the firelight, and stumble right into the darkness where it's waiting. When she finished, a heavy quiet fell over the campsite. The only sound left was the crackle and pop of the burning logs. Ben found himself staring into the woods, his usual confidence shaken. Chloe was pale, her eyes locked on the wall of trees that circled them. Snap! The sound was sharp and clear, a single heavy branch breaking just outside the ring of light. Liam flinched before catching himself. "It's just an animal," he said, his voice a little too loud. "A deer or something. Perfect timing, Maya. Couldn't have planned that better if you tried." But Maya wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on the darkness. She heard it too, but it didn't sound random. It sounded practiced. Perfect. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. The first story was over, but it felt like its echo was just getting started. An hour dragged by. That single perfect snap had put a crack in their cozy little world. Now every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. Every shadow seemed to move on its own. Ben, trying to get the good vibe back, decided it was his turn to tell a story. He aimed for a lighter tone, but the tension in the air made his words feel heavy. "All right, my turn," he said, forcing a grin. "This one's a local legend, perfect for this spot." He pointed toward the lake, its surface like black glass in the moonless night. "They call this Weeping Water Lake. Story is, decades ago, a woman lost her child in this lake. Drowned. They say her grief was so powerful, it soaked right into the water itself. Now, her spirit is still here, but it's twisted. It's lonely. It wants company. On moonless nights, she whispers from the water's edge, calling people in. She promises to show you something you lost at the bottom. But if you get close enough for the water to catch your reflection, she pulls you under. You become another one of her lost treasures." Another cold silence. Liam just shook his head. But Chloe looked absolutely terrified. I think I need to get more water," she stammered, grabbing a metal kettle. It was a weak excuse. They had plenty. "Chloe, maybe you should just wait," Maya said softly. "I'll be fast," Chloe insisted, her voice tight. "I won't even go near the edge." She walked toward the lake, the beam from her flashlight cutting a nervous path ahead. The three of them watched her go until the darkness swallowed her up completely. They sat in silence, just listening. First, nothing. Then, a faint sound drifted back. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper, soft and melodic, almost like a lullaby. And then, a splash. Not a small one. It was a heavy, desperate, final-sounding splash. "Chloe!" Ben yelled, jumping to his feet. They all scrambled up, flashlights waving frantically as they sprinted toward the lake. Their beams danced across the shore. They found the kettle lying on its side just a few feet from the water. They saw her footprints in the mud, leading right to the edge. But Chloe was gone. There were no ripples, no sounds. The lake was perfectly still, like nothing had disturbed it at all. What would you do right then? Trapped in the dark, one of your friends just gone, pulled into a nightmare that you helped create. Before we find out what happens next, if you enjoy stories that get under your skin, make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss what comes out of these woods. The panic wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a physical sickness in their stomachs. Liam, the skeptic, was a believer now. His face was gray, his eyes darting into the suffocating darkness all around them. "It's the stories," he choked out, his voice trembling. "Maya, your story." Then Ben's, "Chloe. She's gone because of the story. We have to stop," Maya whispered, her mind racing. "We can't tell any more." "No." Ben's voice was ragged and wild. He was the leader, and he'd just lost one of his group. He could feel the weight of it crushing him. "That's not how it works. It's feeding on the fear. We need a different story. We have to fight back." He looked at them, his eyes wide with desperation. "I'll tell one. A story with a hero. A story where we win." He started, his voice loud and forced, trying to project a power he didn't have. There was a great warrior, a protector of the forest. He had a shield made of oak and a spear tipped with obsidian. When the creatures of the night came, he didn't run. He stood his ground. He hunted the shadows and dragged them into the light. He kept going, desperately adding details, describing the warrior's strength, his courage, his victory over some shapeless evil. But as he spoke, the air got colder, heavier. A new sound joined the campfire, a low, guttural growl that seemed to be coming from every direction at once. It wasn't a hero that stepped out of the trees. The thing that emerged into the firelight was a twisted mockery of Ben's story. It was tall and muscular like his warrior, but its skin was like gnarled, dark bark. In one hand, it held a crude shield of splintered wood, and in the other a jagged spear that looked like it was carved from black glass. This was no protector. Its eyes glowed with a hungry, predatory intelligence. It was a hunter. Ben's story, born from pure terror, had created a monster made of that exact same terror. The creature roared, and they scattered. It was a blur of motion, a nightmare of snapping branches. Ben, its creator, was its first target. He scrambled through the undergrowth. But the thing was impossibly fast. The last thing Maya and Liam heard was Ben's scream, cut short with a sickening crunch. And then, once again, there was only silence. They were alone. Just two of them. The fire was dying. And the crushing, watchful darkness felt closer than ever. Liam was curled up near the embers, rocking back and forth. "We're going to die," he muttered. "It's our turn. Whose story is next?" Maya stared into the dying flames, her mind a storm of grief and terror. "Chloe. Ben. The stories. It wasn't just what the story was about. It was the feeling behind it. Her story was born from a creeping dread. Ben's was born from panicked, aggressive desperation. The entity didn't care about the words. It cared about the emotion. The fear was its food. A new idea took hold, a crazy, desperate gamble. She had to tell one more story. But this one had to be different. She took a shaky breath. "Liam, listen to me." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I'm going to tell a story." "No," he hissed. "Yes," she insisted. "Just listen." She didn't talk about monsters or ghosts. She didn't talk about heroes or villains. She started telling a boring memory. "Two friends went camping," she began, her voice steady, forcing every ounce of fear out of it. "They were a little lost. But the sun was starting to rise. They could see the first light coming over the mountains. They packed up their tent, which was damp from the morning dew. In the new light, they found the trail easily. They walked back to their car. And the birds were starting to sing." She described the jingle of car keys, the solid, heavy thud of a car door closing, the feeling of being safe, the smell of old coffee in the cup holders. She poured all of her focus into making it boring, safe, and completely uneventful. And as she spoke, the forest seemed to relax its grip. The threatening pressure faded. A faint gray light actually did begin to touch the sky. Hope, fragile and terrifying, started to bloom in her chest. They stumbled through the trees, following a path that was barely there. And then they saw it. The car. It was real. They scrambled inside, locking the doors behind them. A wave of relief so strong it almost made her sick washed over Maya. She leaned her head against the seat, tears streaming down her face. It was over. Liam reached for the ignition, his hand perfectly steady. He looked at Maya. And for the first time all night, he smiled. But the smile was all wrong. It was too calm. His eyes were like empty pits. He turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed once, and died. Liam didn't try again. He just kept looking at Maya, that calm, blank smile plastered on his face. He leaned back in his seat and, in a low, smooth, narrative voice that wasn't his own, he spoke. "And then," he said softly, "came the final, chilling twist. The story that never ends. The one where the monster was hiding in plain sight the entire time." Maya stared at him as the blood drained from her face, the horrific truth crashing down on her. Liam was never the skeptic. He was the mimic. He was the shadow in the trees. He was the entity. He didn't just bring the stories to life. He pulled them out of his friends, feeding on the fear he helped them build, trapping them in a perfect, horrifying story. His greatest story of all was the character he'd been playing. They say the stories you tell around a campfire are just that. Stories. But sometimes the most dangerous monster isn't in the story itself. It's the one telling it. And his story is never really over. What campfire stories have you heard that felt a little too real? Let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe, so you're never left alone in the dark.